Hiraku awoke earlier than usual after dreaming about his own death in his previous world. When he stepped outside and greeted everyone, he reflected that he had never expected to live such a dreamlike life. As a soul, Hiraku found himself standing before the god who watched over the world. The god reminded him that he had lived for 39 years, but his life had been marked by cruelty and misfortune. He had been betrayed by others and later suffered from a terminal illness. The god admitted that Hiraku's fate had partly been his own mistake, and as an apology, he offered him a second chance, this time with a body that would never again fall ill. The god also promised to grant him a single wish. After thinking for a moment, Hiraku expressed his desire to try farming. During his illness, he had often watched a show about farming, and now he wished to experience it himself. He added that he had never been good at socializing and preferred to live in a place with few people. Although the god explained that farming was not under his jurisdiction, he contacted the agriculture god, who granted Hiraku the power of the almighty farming tool. When Hiraku opened his eyes again, he found himself in a forest. For the first time in years, he felt healthy and full of energy. Excited to begin his new life, he wondered how to use the almighty farming tool. As he thought this, the tool appeared in his hand, and he began digging. To his amazement, he did not feel any fatigue, and the soil was soft and fertile, perfect for growing vegetables. Realizing he first needed food and water, Hiraku explored his surroundings. He discovered a large tree, which he marked as his landmark and temporary camp. Although he searched for a river, he found none. Determined, he transformed his tool into a shovel and dug into the ground until he uncovered underground water. While preparing the ground around the tree, Hiraku also searched for food but had no success. Spotting a smaller tree that would eventually obstruct his plans, he decided to cut it down. With a single swing of his tool, now transformed into an axe, the tree fell, nearly crushing him. He quickly turned the tool into a hatchet and cut the tree into manageable pieces. As night fell, Hiraku attempted to start a fire by turning his tool into a magnifying glass. But the sun had already set. With no way to make fire, he hollowed out a section of the large tree and sheltered inside. Using his tool, he carved plates and cups. When he stepped outside, he realized the moonlight was bright enough to see by. To his surprise, there were 2 moons in the sky, confirming his suspicion that he truly was in another world. The next morning, Hiraku resumed clearing the ground and cutting down more trees. Feeling hungry, he prepared to search for food. But before he could, a massive rabbit-like monster attacked him. With a single swing of his tool, Hiraku killed it. After cooking and eating the rabbit, he turned his attention to building a toilet. He dug a deep pit, adding an entrance, a vent hole, and a tree trunk as a seat. Finding it difficult to relax in the open, he constructed a small cabin around it. Satisfied, Hiraku focused on cultivating the land. He imagined the crops he could grow but then realized he had no seeds. The following morning, however, he was astonished to see plants sprouting on their own, and he wondered if this was the work of the almighty tool. Determined to protect his growing field, Hiraku began building a wall and a ditch around it to keep out rabbits and other beasts. The project took several days, during which he killed another rabbit. To his relief, the plants continued to grow rapidly. He hoped they would prove edible and not merely decorative flowers. Hiraku eventually built a hut, though he struggled to lift heavy pieces of wood. To solve the problem, he dug down into the ground to create more vertical space inside. One day, he noticed 2 stray dogs outside. They looked rough but not aggressive, so he invited them in and offered them some of the boar meat he had recently hunted. While sharing the food, he wondered what to do with the surplus meat. Observing them more closely, he realized that one of the dogs was pregnant. After eating, the female dog began experiencing labor pains. Unsure of how to help, Hiraku simply allowed them to remain inside the hut while he returned to sleep in the hollow of the large tree for the night. The following morning, he checked on them and discovered that the female had given birth to 4 healthy puppies. To celebrate, he gave them more meat. At first, he assumed the dogs would eventually leave, but they decided to stay. Since they had grown fond of the hut, Hiraku constructed a new house for himself. In the meantime, his crops began to flourish. He particularly enjoyed the taste of the tomatoes he grew. The dogs began to help by hunting small animals and guarding the land. Hiraku grew attached to them and decided to give them names: Kuro for the male and Yuki for the female. The 4 puppies he named Kuroichi, Kironi, Kirasan, and Kyoan. Encouraged by his progress, Hiraku planned to build a storehouse, expand his farm, and cultivate even more vegetables. Elsewhere, beyond the mountain, a young girl expressed her wish to cross into the neighboring region. A man warned her of the danger, asking if she had heard of the infamous Forest of Death, a land overrun with monsters. At the same time, the god who had sent Hiraku to this new life decided to check on him. Feeling guilty for Hiraku's cruel past, the god wanted to ensure things were going well. To his dismay, he realized he had mistakenly placed Hiraku right in the middle of the Forest of Death. Hiraku, however, had discovered another secret of the almighty farming tool. Whenever he wished to grow a particular crop, the plant would magically sprout without seeds. Delighted, he thanked the gods for such blessings and even crafted small statues in their honor. He began experimenting with fruit trees while spending time playing with the dogs, realizing how lonely he would feel without their companionship. The dogs often guided him back to camp, allowing him to explore further. On one of his trips, he discovered a river about half an hour away. He decided to dig a tunnel to divert the water toward his camp, though it would take time. In the meantime, he built a toilet near the river. Hiraku also discovered that his tool could transform into a wheelbarrow, enabling him to haul loads tirelessly. With this, he expanded his crop fields further, adding vegetables like soybeans. Though he longed to season them with salt, he had yet to find any. As time passed and the weather grew colder, Hiraku saw snow on the mountains and began preparing for winter by gathering food and firewood. During this time, a giant spider appeared. To his surprise, the creature was friendly and even wove a handkerchief for him. It chose to live in the large tree nearby and enjoyed eating potatoes. In exchange for food and pelts, the spider produced clothes, curtains, and bedding for Hiraku, who felt more civilized than before. He named the spider Zabatin. When winter arrived, Zabatin stopped descending from the tree, and Hiraku assumed it had gone into hibernation. He felt lonely until summer finally returned. By then, the puppies had grown and briefly left, only to return with partners. Zabatin also re-emerged, this time with offspring of its own. With so many new mouths to feed, Hiraku expanded his fields once again. One day, Zabatin raised an alarm, and Kuro led Hiraku deep into the forest, where they found a young girl entangled in spiderwebs. Naked and weak, she pleaded for help. As Hiraku approached, she suddenly bit his neck, draining his blood, and transformed into a grown woman. Shocked, he wondered if she was a monster. The dogs immediately attacked her, beating her until she reverted to the form of a small girl. She explained weakly that she had not meant to harm him, but needed blood to regain her strength. Since she had overexerted herself, she could no longer maintain her adult form. Although cautious, Hiraku felt pity for her and allowed her to drink more of his blood. He then brought her back to his camp. The girl marveled at his crops, amazed that vegetables were growing in such a dangerous forest. When he offered her a tomato, she tasted it eagerly and asked to try more. She introduced herself as Rururushi, a vampire and researcher of medicinal plants. She confessed she had been fleeing nobles who tried to steal her research. While hiding in the forest, she had hoped to find rare plants for her studies. Ru was astonished that Hiraku had managed to survive in the Forest of Death, tame beasts, and use strange magic to create tools. Hiraku, realizing this was the first human he had encountered, asked her to stay with him. Though she hesitated, explaining that she was a vampire and being hunted. Hiraku admitted that despite coming here to live alone, he no longer wanted solitude. Touched by his honesty, and with nowhere else to go, Ru agreed, albeit shyly. The next morning, Ru appeared younger than before. She explained that this form would discourage him from acting inappropriately, and Hiraku accepted her reasoning. He told her he planned to grow sweet potatoes and jokingly referred to her as his first villager, though Kuro barked in protest, forcing him to correct himself to 30th villager. When Ru requested medicinal herbs, Hiraku agreed to try growing them. She pointed out they would need seeds, but Hiraku revealed that seeds were unnecessary with his tool. Using her magic, Ru assisted in other ways, such as lighting up the toilet and the hut. She also informed Hiraku that one layer of the soil beneath his land contained salt, something he had missed despite all his digging. As Hiraku waited for his fruit trees to mature, Zabutin once again rang the alarm. Together with Ru, he rushed to investigate and found another girl restrained by the dogs and spiders. She begged for release, claiming she had only attacked in self-defense. After freeing her, they watched as she healed herself with magic. When she noticed Ru, her demeanor changed, and she attempted to capture her. The dogs subdued her quickly, proving resistant to her spells. Hiraku brought both women back to his camp, where Ru explained that this girl was in the same situation as she once had been. The newcomer introduced herself as Tia, an angel. Hiraku assumed she must serve the gods, but Ru corrected him, explaining that angels were a warrior race more brawny than thoughtful. When asked why she was pursuing Ru, Tia revealed that Ru carried a bounty for the damage she caused in town. Ru admitted she had blown up a place after nobles pressured her, though she insisted it had only happened once, and only because she had lost her patience. Ru surprised Tia by openly admitting her weaknesses. When Tia asked why, Ru explained that she had realized just how powerless she was after facing the dogs. Wanting to make peace, Ru invited Tia to live with them, certain she would grow to like it. Tia agreed, and Ru showed her the fields, where they spent the day harvesting vegetables. Hiraku offered Tia some fresh produce, which she tried and enjoyed. After several days, Tia asked if they could grow more strawberries. Hiraku admitted they could, but pointed out that even if they expanded the fields, they would struggle to keep up with harvesting everything. Tia agreed, and realized they needed more helping hands. Hiraku added that even if they managed to harvest all the crops, they might not be able to eat them all. Around that time, he noticed that Kioi, Kironi, Kirasen, and Kuroyan each had several pups, and the wolf family had grown considerably. He realized that once the pups matured, they too would find partners, which meant their numbers would only increase. Ru pointed out that the current hut would not be large enough for the growing pack. Taking this into account, Hiraku decided to build a special area for the wolves next to the orchard. Though the new pups had not yet been named, there were simply too many, and Hiraku found it difficult to think of enough names. He was pleased that the family was thriving. Around the same time, he noticed some of Zabutin's spider children leaving the area, though a few decided to stay. One day, Tia told Hiraku she would be away for a while and flew off. A few days later, she returned with a group of high elf girls. They introduced themselves as Lee, Leaf, Liot, Liz, Lili, Lita, and Lee. Hiraku quickly noticed they all had similar names. Lee explained they were related, members of the Lile's clan. At Tia's suggestion, they had come seeking a home. Tia shared their story. The elves had once lived in a village in the north, but their people had been nearly wiped out after being dragged into a human war. Their race had since scattered, and these sisters had wandered in search of a new home. Ru urged Hiraku to accept them, remarking that high elves were a gifted race. Though they looked youthful, Lee revealed that she was the oldest at just over 400 years, while the youngest, Le, was a little over 300. After some discussion, Hiraku agreed to let them stay, as long as they could get along with their new companions. When the elves asked about these companions, Ru introduced Zabutin and the wolves. To her amusement, the elves fainted at the sight. Since they wished to live together, Hiraku built them a single large house. The elves, possessing more knowledge about construction, directed the work while Hiraku dug and hauled lumber. After 10 days, the house was complete. It was spacious, with a large communal hall for gathering and dining, storage rooms on each side, and private rooms upstairs. Ru and Tia were impressed by the craftsmanship, and though Hiraku felt a pang of jealousy, he was grateful to learn their building techniques. He was surprised by how practical the elves were. Contrary to his assumptions that elves ate only berries, rose with the sun, avoided fire, and wore no metal, he discovered that they ate meat, used fire, and were unafraid of mining or smithing. Lee explained that living too close to nature without tools would mean certain death in such a harsh environment. She revealed their plans to build a furnace to smelt iron, which surprised Hiraku since he had always thought of smithing as dwarves' work. Soon, the elves completed the furnace and began producing metal goods. When Hiraku received a simple iron pan, he felt as though their civilization had taken a great leap forward. Still, the elves admitted there were things they had failed to do, such as settling down or reproducing. Hiraku jokingly thought they had achieved the first already, but kept silent about the second, noting the way they looked at him with amused smiles. Later, the elves discovered a wheat field. Hiraku explained that they had harvested it and ground it into flour. Lei then asked if they could make bread, producing a jar of yeast. Delighted, Hiraku agreed, and they soon enjoyed freshly baked bread together. Inspired, Hiraku decided it was time to expand the wheat fields. At that point, he asked Ru if the land technically belonged to anyone. Ru explained that the forest was unclaimed but technically under the domain of the Demon Lord. Hearing this, Hiraku worried whether the Demon Lord might object to their activities. Ru reassured him that since he had cultivated the land himself, it was his by right. Tia, Ru, and Lee were amazed. Not only had he tamed the inferno wolves and a demon spider, but he had also created fertile fields of thriving crops. Lee speculated that the soil might be unusually fertile, but she and the others noticed how little Hiraku knew about the wider world. His misconceptions about elves and angels revealed that his ignorance went beyond mere gaps in knowledge. Meanwhile, Hiraku returned to his hut and crafted a wooden cup. He realized he had not made progress on his waterway and considered whether the elves might help. Soon after, Zabuton brought him a queen bee it had caught. The spider had no intention of eating it, and the bee seemed calm. Hiraku decided to build it a small shelter so it could start a hive, hoping to harvest honey in the future. When Tia saw him working, she approached curiously, but apologized and flew off, wary of the bees. Hiraku realized he would need to plant flowers nearby for the hive. He then dug a large reservoir, intending to bring water from the river. When Lee asked how far along he was with the waterway and learned he had barely begun, she suggested they first consider what material to build it from. Hiraku thought of stone, but Lee explained it would be difficult to obtain. Wood, he suggested next, but she pointed out that the long distance would cause too many leaks. Finally, Hiraku decided to use dirt. With the almighty tool, he compacted it until it was as solid and sturdy as concrete. He let the elves handle the foundation while he sealed the seams and strengthened the structure. During this time, Hiraku caught some fish from the river. Ru and Tia recognized them as dangerous creatures from the forest of death and worried about eating them. They insisted he try them first, and after he found them delicious, they too began eating. Pleased with the discovery, Hiraku caught more and preserved them with salt. To his amazement, he also managed to grow rice. With access to water secured, he decided to build a paddy. After digging and flooding the area, the girls asked if he intended to raise fish, but he explained it was for rice. Together, they planted the crop. It grew quickly, and when the time came, Hiraku showed them how to harvest, dry, and thresh it using the almighty tool to fashion a thresher, sieve, mortar, and pestle. Though the process was laborious, the result was polished rice. Finally, he cooked it into rice balls, adding some of the preserved fish. The girls enjoyed the meal so much that they ate everything, leaving only a single grain for Hiraku. Since the girls could clean themselves with magic, but he could not, Hiraku decided to build a bathhouse. The others said they could simply wash in the river, but he explained the benefits of bathing, especially in winter. With their help, the construction progressed well. Midway, however, he wondered if it was safe to release wastewater back into the river. Tia suggested they use slimes, which could consume waste and purify the water. She brought some, and Hiraku built a purification pool for them. Tia even suggested placing them in toilets, though Hiraku was reluctant at the idea of relieving himself over a slime. Later, Hiraku found mushrooms growing on old logs. Unsure whether they were poisonous, he struck the logs with the almighty tool, hoping to cultivate safe varieties such as shiitake. That evening, Hiraku taught the girls how to use the bath. He explained that after undressing, they should first wash themselves in the washing area before soaking. Lee interrupted Hiraku, suggesting it would be easier if he simply demonstrated the bathing steps. Hiraku agreed and stepped into the bath, nearly melting with joy at the sensation. The girls, eager to try it themselves, quickly followed his example. Feeling overwhelmed, Hiraku offered to leave so they could enjoy it privately, planning to use it after them. However, the girls insisted they should bathe together to save the trouble of reheating the water. Surrounded by them, Hiraku found it difficult to relax and considered building a separate bath for men. Yet the girls argued that such a bath would essentially become his private retreat, which they felt was unfair. The following day, Hiraku discovered that mushrooms had sprouted and decided to prepare a mushroom hot pot for the evening meal. Before long, the dogs returned, bringing with them 5 new elves. As the newcomers introduced themselves, Hiraku noticed their names all began with Allah, suggesting they were related. Lee confirmed this, explaining that she knew them from her former village, though it had been 2 centuries since they last met. Hiraku welcomed the new arrivals, and Lee proposed building them a house while also making improvements to Hiraku's own dwelling. Meanwhile, Kuro observed the increasing number of females around Hiraku and reflected on his own past. He recalled once living alone in the forest, undefeated by any male, until a female bested him in combat. The two had traveled together, and when she became pregnant, Kuro looked forward to raising a family. Their lives changed, however, when they encountered a grappler bear, the forest's king. Though defeated, they were spared, but their injuries left them unable to hunt. Weakened, they were eventually driven away by prey and wandered into the heart of the forest, a place even the grappler bear avoided. There, they found Hiraku. At first, Kuro was skeptical of how a fragile human could survive alone, until he sensed the immense power of the almighty tool. Believing the end had come, Kuro accepted his fate, but instead of killing them, Hiraku shared food and cared for them. Out of gratitude, Kuro and his mate pledged loyalty, accepting Hiraku as their master. Over time, they were given names, shelter, and raised children, eventually forming a thriving pack. Kuro still worried that Hiraku did not fully grasp the terrifying reputation of the Inferno Wolf, but he remained grateful for their bond. Hiraku's new house was soon completed, and the girls proudly showed him around. While exploring, he stumbled upon a locked room containing a bed for 2. Embarrassed, he quickly closed the door and pretended he had not seen it. The next day, Hiraku decided to attempt a new dish, curry. Leading the girls to a section of his crops, he pointed out unusual plants that would not normally thrive in snowy climates, yet flourished here thanks to the almighty tool. He collected cumin, turmeric, coriander, cilantro, black pepper, and cayenne peppers, carefully explaining each spice's role in the recipe. The dogs recoiled from the smell of cilantro, which intrigued the girls, who thought it worth studying. As he prepared the curry, only Lee remained nearby, explaining that Rue and Tia were busy researching a protective talisman. Hiraku cooked with focus, heating rapeseed oil, searing rabbit meat, grinding spices, and sautéing onions, ginger, garlic, and tomatoes until a fragrant paste formed. He seasoned it with spices and salt, then added meat, soybeans, and water to simmer. Realizing he had forgotten naan, he explained to the girls that it was made similarly to bread, except the dough was rolled flat before baking. By the time Rue and Tia returned, dinner was ready. They gathered together, dipping naan into the curry, and delighted in the taste so much that Hiraku worried there would be none left for him. When Rue and Tia offered curry to the dogs, the animals bolted from the strong scent. With winter approaching, Hiraku prepared by collecting firewood and asking Zabitan, who would soon hibernate, to provide extra blankets. He worked with Rue and Tia to preserve meat through smoking and drying, knowing hunting would be scarce during the cold season. For vegetables, he devised a storage box with 2 levels. The upper for produce covered in blankets and snow, the lower to collect meltwater, keeping the vegetables dry. Though he wished he could use magic like the others, he remained grateful for their help, as he contributed mainly through farming and cooking. Rue reassured him that he was the truly remarkable one, as no one else had ever survived so long in the forest. During the winter, they spent more time indoors. To pass the days, Hiraku introduced games such as reversi, chess, and mahjong. At first, Rue doubted reversi's simplicity, but Tia pointed out its potential for complex strategy. Annoyed by Hiraku's praise of Tia's insight, Rue challenged her. When Tia began winning, Rue tried flipping the board under the guise of an accident, but Tia restored it with magic. Rue attempted again, only for Tia to undo it once more. Eventually, they agreed to play best of 3. Elsewhere, Hiraku was astonished to find the dogs playing chess with ease, strategizing with uncanny precision. Realizing the dangerous aura around them, he vowed never to challenge them. Rue, however, attempted a match and lost decisively, refraining from flipping the board out of fear of Kuro. Later, Hiraku joined a mahjong game with Kuro, Tia, and Lee, only to finish last, leaving him disheartened as Kuro emerged victorious. To lift his spirits, he created a miniature bowling game, humorously naming the pins after villains. Through daily games, winter passed quickly, and spring arrived. One morning, Zabitan raised an alarm, and Hiraku looked skyward to see a massive creature descending. Believing it a dragon, he was corrected by Tia. It was a wyvern. The beast unleashed fire, forcing Ru and Tia to defend with magic, while elves scrambled to save the burning crops. Unsure how to respond, Hiraku summoned the almighty tool, which transformed into a spear. He hurled it, piercing the wyvern's barrier and injuring its wing. With a second throw, he struck its chest, killing it instantly. Puzzled, Hiraku asked if wyverns were common, but Ru explained they were rare. Tia reasoned that if it had been sent by someone, it would not have come alone, given its value. Relieved, Hiraku assumed it was a chance encounter and then wondered if the meat was edible. The girls assured him it was considered a delicacy. He prepared 3 dishes from the wyvern, and everyone enjoyed the feast. When Ru asked Tia if she could have blocked Hiraku's spear, Tia admitted she could not, noting even the wyvern's defenses had failed. Ru remarked that it was fortunate they had first met the dogs and not Hiraku himself. Far away, in the Demon Lord's castle within the demonic kingdom of Galgardo, the great generals received word of the wyvern's fall. Randon was stunned, as it normally required their full military to repel such a beast. Beazle revealed it had been slain from the ground with only 2 strikes, alarming Randon, who feared they stood no chance against such power. Beazle insisted they, as the 4 generals, must control the situation before panic spread. Still, Randon contemplated resignation, though Beazle tried to dissuade him. Elsewhere, in the lair of the gatekeeper dragons, the blue dragon Dorim asked Gucci if he had seen the battle. Gucci confirmed it, adding that the spear attack would likely pierce even him cleanly. Dorim considered retaliation, but Gucci warned it would be foolish to provoke such power. Meanwhile, Hiraku, though pleased with the wyvern meat, felt something was missing. He decided it was time to make alcohol. Believing wine existed in this world, he chose grapes as the source. The girls grew excited, quickly harvesting the fruit. Hiraku built a pressing area and asked them to stomp the grapes. At first hesitant, the girls eased into it by singing an old village song to keep rhythm. Together, they filled several barrels, and Hiraku decided to let the natural yeast on the grapes ferment the wine. Hiraku initially wondered if he had brewed too much, but when he heard the girls say they would finish it quickly, he began to think he might have made too little. Meanwhile, the god who had sent Hiraku to this new life watched him closely, questioning whether these blessings were enough to earn forgiveness. The goddess of agriculture disagreed, pointing out that the god had punished an innocent soul and, while attempting to save him, had instead cast him into the deadly forest of death. The goddess was furious when she realized the god had also given Hiraku a replica of the holy lance Grime. She argued that such a weapon should have killed a human instantly by draining all life force. The god defended himself, saying the lance was only being used as a farming tool and that he had secured permission. He added that Hiraku was safe because he had been given a healthy body with extraordinary recovery abilities. The goddess, however, accused him of carelessness and grew even angrier when she learned about the statues Hiraku had built in the god's likeness. Appearing as an old man, she refused to listen to his excuses and punished him, sentencing him to sit still for 300 years. Back in the forest, Zabuton signaled Hiraku when the wolves and spiders caught another girl. Ru recognized her as her younger sister, Flora. As they escorted Flora to the village, she explained that she had followed rumors of an angel pursuing her and had wandered into the forest. Hiraku suggested she stay for a while to rest, and although Flora agreed, she felt unsettled learning that Hiraku was Ru's husband. Ru explained proudly that Hiraku was the master of the Inferno Wolves and had even slain a wyvern. Shocked, Flora quickly apologized for her doubts. It was then that Hiraku realized Kuro was not a dog, but a wolf, and he grew curious about the Inferno part of their name. When Kuro breathed fire, Hiraku was amazed. Ru and Tia were surprised he had not known this already, as the Inferno Wolves were well-known beasts who had lived with him for quite some time. Hiraku prepared food for Flora, who enjoyed it thoroughly. During the meal, he expressed his wish to make miso and soy sauce. As Flora was unfamiliar with these, he explained that they were made from fermented soybeans. Curious, she asked about fermentation, and Hiraku compared it to the process of making cheese and wine. Fascinated by the role of microorganisms, Flora found herself inspired with a new field of research. After resting for several days, Flora left, but within a month, she returned with her maids and declared her intention to live there. Anne, speaking on behalf of the maids, told Hiraku that they were ready to serve him however he wished. Flora also brought 2 cows, which excited Hiraku, as they could now produce butter and cheese. During this time, Tia reflected that while the vampires, elves, wolves, and spiders all had large groups, she was alone. She left briefly but soon returned with her own followers. 3 angels named Grand Maria, Kudal, and Coron, as well as a group of lizard men led by Daga and even a chicken. With the arrival of the ogre maids, household chores became much more efficient. Hiraku noticed, however, that their cooking was simple, so he began teaching them various methods, sparking their interest in culinary arts. The 3 angels Tia brought were ordered to patrol the forest, and Hiraku realized that Tia had planned this as added security after the wyvern attack. The lizard men took charge of heavy outdoor labor, which accelerated construction projects. Since Hiraku had trouble distinguishing between them, he made Daga wear a scarf. Soon, their numbers grew significantly. Lee returned with a large group of elves she had found in the forest. To Hiraku's surprise, they were all female. When he asked about the males, Lee explained sadly that none had survived, but the women intended to rebuild their numbers. Hiraku chose not to question how they planned to accomplish that. Several days later, Hiraku gathered the representatives of each group to decide on a name for their settlement. Rue suggested naming it after Hiraku, but he disliked the sound. Anne proposed naming it after the forest, but as it was known as the Forest of Death, Hiraku felt it was far too ominous. At that moment, Zabutin pointed toward the door. When Hiraku opened it, he saw the massive great tree nearby and decided on the name Great Tree Village, or Teju Village. That evening, he announced the name and declared that a celebration would be held. The villagers began calling him their mayor. Although Hiraku insisted that such a decision should be made collectively later, the girls assured him that everyone already considered him the mayor. The celebration commenced with the first batch of wine they had produced, and Hiraku officially became mayor of the Great Tree Village. Despite his new title, his daily routines remained largely unchanged. Not long after, a messenger from the demonic kingdom arrived. Beezle requested to speak with the village's leader, and Hiraku stepped forward. Beezle presented a gift and explained that the demon lord wished to clarify the settlement's status. Hiraku, recalling that the land was under the demon lord's protection, worried whether they might demand taxes or force them out. He proposed that, in exchange for being allowed to remain, the village would pay 10% of their harvest as tax. Though Hiraku feared this offer was too low, Beezle readily accepted. Hiraku further suggested that the tax be collected each year before winter. The 2 sides signed a contract stating that the tax applied only to field crops, not to milk, eggs, honey, or alcohol, which could instead be traded separately. Although Hiraku later worried he had been too aggressive in negotiations, Beezle left satisfied. The girls reassured him that he had done well, noting that typical taxes ranged from 50 to 60%. Furthermore, requiring collection directly from the village forced the demonic kingdom to recognize their residents formally. The demon lord's protection was an added benefit. Excited, Rue showed Hiraku the gift Beezle had left behind, an almighty medicine effective whether ingested or applied to wounds. Beezle later reported to the other 4 generals, who were astonished that a village strong enough to kill a wyvern would submit so easily. Randon suspected ulterior motives, and Beezle admitted he shared the concern. He explained that he had been left with no choice, as the settlement was home to the vampire princess, the Angel of Annihilation, an army of high elves, a pack of inferno wolves, and 3 powerful angels. To oppose them would have meant war with the demonic kingdom itself. When they examined the villagers' gift, they discovered beautifully shaped fruits wrapped in cloth made by a great demon spider, a creature once capable of battling a demon lord to a standstill. Not long afterward, Dorim, the true ruler of the dragons, visited the village accompanied by Gucci. They brought gifts and explained that Dorim's lair lay to the south, making them neighbors of a sort. Hiraku was surprised when Dorim bowed repeatedly and apologized that the dragon was too large to enter their homes. Gucci suggested Dorim take a human form, which he did. After sharing food and drink, Dorim grew fond of the alcohol and wished to stay, but Gucci reminded him of his duties and warned that he might become a nuisance if he lingered too long. Following these visits, Hiraku realized the village needed a proper way to receive guests. He proposed building a guest house for 4 people, but the girls advised that it should be much larger, as visitors usually arrived in groups. Together, they began work on a guest house that could host up to 30 guests. Hiraku began thinking of a more proper way to welcome guests. Up to that point, the angels would capture newcomers and lead them to the village entrance, and whenever Zabutin sounded the alarm, everyone armed themselves as if preparing for battle. To improve this, Hiraku introduced a new signal for visitors and gave Zabutin a bell to ring. He also proposed that he, Ru, and Tia should greet the guests personally, but this idea was rejected. He was instead required to include elves, maids, and lizardmen in the welcoming group. Before long, Garf and several beastmen from the Howling Village arrived, expressing their desire to establish ties with Hiraku's settlement. Ru immediately took charge, asking if Garf's group was complete. When Garf confirmed, Ru declared that anyone else would be treated as an enemy. Soon, the Inferno Wolves brought in a few more beastmen who had been hiding, prompting Garf to apologize. Ru warned them to behave and then permitted their entry. Once inside the guest house, however, the visitors were locked in. Tia explained that every previous guest had brought a gift, and though she was unsure if the beastmen were enemies, she insisted that since they had ignored standard visitor protocols, they would not receive the usual hospitality. The women opposed giving them fine food or alcohol, but Hiraku managed to convince them to at least provide some alcohol. While the beastmen ate and drank, Hiraku inquired how they had learned about the village. Garf explained that they had heard about it from the Demon Lord's men. The Howling Village, he said, survived by hunting and mining, trading their resources with human settlements. However, with recent unrest among the human villages, trade had become unreliable, so they sought new partners. When Tia questioned why some of Garf's group had remained hidden, one of them admitted it was a precaution in case the others failed to return. The following day, Garf expressed interest in establishing trade and opening a market. Since travel to Hiraku's village was difficult, he requested that Hiraku visit their settlement instead, assuming he could navigate the forest easily. Hiraku reasoned that the wolves could pull carts for the journey and agreed. For their first exchange, Garf brought silverware, glassworks, and other metal crafts, asking for food in return. Hiraku accepted, and when Garf departed, he admitted he had not known about the custom of bringing gifts. He promised to bring one next time, though he warned it would not be extravagant. Hiraku reassured him that value mattered less than thoughtfulness. Later, when it was time to arrange further trade, the women refused to let Hiraku travel, insisting that Tia accompany some lizardmen instead. Normally, the journey to the Howling Village would take 10 days, but Dorim offered to transport them in exchange for a barrel of wine. Since his first visit, Dorim had begun visiting frequently, always bearing treasures or weapons as gifts, so no one objected. A few days later, Tia returned with Dorim, who was sulking. She explained that the beastmen had been terrified upon seeing them arrive with a dragon, and initially refused any goods. However, following Hiraku's advice, she offered free samples. The beastmen loved them, and quickly traded away all their supplies. Dorim complained that even his promised barrel of wine had been included, but Hiraku cheered him up by promising more at dinner. Tia then revealed that the mayor of Howling Village had asked if some of his people could resettle with them. Hiraku welcomed the idea, saying more workers would be helpful. Tia added that 20 beastmen wished to move, all of them young women. Though Hiraku was slightly disappointed, since the village was already female-dominated, he accepted, but requested that a few men also be sent. Soon, the women arrived, led by a girl named Sina. She introduced herself, thanking Hiraku for accepting them, and assured him they were willing to serve however he saw fit, though she pleaded not to be abandoned. Hiraku told them to take their time adjusting, promising that once settled, they could request their preferred housing. He reassured them that no one would be cast out. When he asked about the men he had requested, Sina revealed that they had brought 3 young males as well. Hiraku was surprised, but realized they could be valuable for the village's future. At first, the newcomers expected harsh treatment, but when they were instead welcomed warmly, they quickly adapted. Hiraku noticed that Sina could use magic, and assumed all beastmen could. She reassured him that the children could not yet, and suggested they could learn together, though Hiraku knew they would eventually surpass him. Not long after, Hiraku harvested apples when he heard a disturbance near the village. The ground shook, and Gran Maria reported that a grappling bear and a bloody viper were fighting in the northern forest. Curious if the bear meat was edible, Hiraku asked to be taken there. Despite Gran Maria's caution, he insisted on being dropped into the fray. With a single blow, he killed both monsters. The killer angels who witnessed it were astonished, admitting that even they could not have managed such a feat. Later, Hiraku cooked the bear meat with wine, preparing a braised dish. Though gamey, it was edible. The women scolded him for using precious wine, but he explained that cooking with it was common. He fried the viper, which tasted like chicken, and enjoyed it more. Inspired, he asked Flora for an antibacterial agent to make the dish safer. She gave him a potion so strong it destroyed everything it touched. When he requested something weaker, she provided another. Hiraku also checked on the miso project. Flora admitted she had no progress. Despite following his instructions, no fermentation had occurred, and her attempts had exploded 3 times. Hiraku encouraged her to try again. The next day, he collected eggs, mixed them with salt, vinegar, and oil, and produced mayonnaise, which paired perfectly with the fried viper. For the miso, he and Flora simmered soybeans, ground them, and added koji mold with the almighty tool. They shaped the mixture into balls, packed them into barrels, and left them to ferment. Soon after, Rue informed Hiraku that new visitors had arrived. Elder dwarves led by Donovan. They had heard of the village's fine alcohol and requested to share in it. The women refused to give any away for free, but Donovan offered knowledge in exchange. He explained that they had studied alcohol production their entire lives, and, with the village's high-quality crops, could help produce superior spirits. The offer was accepted, and before long the dwarves demonstrated distillation, producing corn whiskey. They eventually settled in the village as brewers. The community held a celebration to welcome both beastmen and dwarves. Hiraku, pleased that men had finally joined, asked Donovan if any women in the village interested him. Donovan replied that the women were too young for his tastes, and that unless they could grow a beard, they were not for him. One day, Hiraku spotted a dragon approaching and prepared for battle. Dorim appeared and halted it. As the dragons stared each other down, a third, even more intimidating dragon arrived. Hiraku hurled his spear, but the creature dodged at the last moment. Guai intervened, explaining that they were not enemies. The 2 dragons then transformed into human form, revealing themselves as Dorim's wife, Grafaloon, and daughter, Lastis Moon. They had followed Dorim because his frequent absences, and his habit of taking treasures before returning home at dawn, had made them suspect infidelity. Hiraku realized that building Dorim a house in the village, intended to prevent him from returning drunk, had likely caused the misunderstanding. Dorim tried to explain that the situation was a matter of high-level politics, though the women remained convinced he was hiding something. Dorim insisted that he lacked the courage to engage in an affair, and his wife and daughter agreed with that assessment. Hiraku apologized for his earlier behavior, but Dorim also made his family apologize in turn. Lastis Moon admitted fault for nearly burning down the village, while Grafaloon apologized for considering obliterating the man who had pointed a spear at her daughter. Relieved that the matter was resolved, Hiraku excused himself and left. Afterward, Dorim asked his wife and daughter if they now understood what he was doing. Grafaloon confirmed that she did, remarking that while the village was small in number, its strength gave it the power to challenge even dragons, something she had never thought possible. Lastis Moon also noted that her mother had been forced to evade Hiraku's attack rather than defend against it. Grafaloon explained that she had only survived thanks to the intervention of a spider, an old friend who had pulled her out of danger. Without that help, she admitted, she would not have survived. She then instructed her daughter to remain in the village and ensure that such strength would never be turned against them. Hiraku agreed to let Lastis Moon live there, and she quickly began assisting with work. However, being a dragon, her overwhelming strength often caused her to break whatever she touched. Hiraku wondered what sort of task he could entrust to her, especially since Dorim had asked that she be given some responsibility. He soon noticed that the wolves appeared restless, and Tia clarified that it wasn't only the wolves, but also the chickens and cows who reacted with fear. She explained that dragons possess not only immense power, but also wisdom and knowledge. This gave Hiraku an idea. He decided to send Lastis Moon to manage diplomatic relations with Beezle. When Beezle encountered the dragon, he was stunned. She inquired about his needs, and he nervously requested more fruit like before. Lastis Moon explained that they were low on oranges but had strawberries, which Beezle quickly agreed to buy in large quantities. She also offered apples, pears, pamons, and watermelons, which Bezel also purchased. Returning to his people, Bezel reported that the village now had a dragon. Though the news was alarming, they decided to send a spy to learn more. Bezel then summoned his daughter, Florim, and instructed her to investigate the village's military strength. Upon arriving, Florim was greeted by Lastus Moon, who showed her around. However, when a messenger from Howling Village was spotted, Lastus Moon left Florim to wander the settlement on her own. Observing the village, Florim was surprised to see so many races coexisting. She assumed Lastus Moon commanded them all, but soon learned that an even higher authority existed. Eventually, she saw Hiraku, but dismissing him as just a human, paid him no attention. Later, Lastus Moon revealed that he was the mayor. Shocked, Florim could not believe that a human commanded such a diverse population. When Lastus Moon explained that Hiraku was strong enough to defeat her mother, Florim began to panic, realizing she had not only ignored him, but had also been quite rude. Hiraku learned that Florim was Bezel's daughter and would be staying for some time. He noticed that she grew close to Lastus Moon, though whenever he appeared, Florim became stiff and awkward. Meanwhile, the village slimes had begun to multiply, appearing in new colors. This went unnoticed until a purple slime drank a barrel of alcohol, angering the girls. They put it on trial and declared it guilty. But Florim reminded them that a slime could not reflect on its actions or change its behavior. Accepting this, they let the matter go. In time, a red slime began joining village feasts, drinking alongside everyone. As autumn arrived, Hiraku and the others enjoyed hot pot meals. He remarked that seafood would make the dish even better. Curious, the girls asked what he meant, and he explained about cod, crabs, monkfish, and seaweed. Rue instructed Flora to research these foods, while Tia expressed disbelief that crabs could be eaten given their hard shells. Florim then mentioned Shashado, a harbor city in the demonic kingdom, which could be reached by traveling south. Lastus Moon decided to fly there, and Florim accompanied her, claiming to know a merchant. 3 days later, they returned with Michael Goran, a merchant from Shashado. After introducing himself to Hiraku, Michael presented the seafood he had brought, explaining that the seaweed Hiraku wanted was usually discarded by fishermen, but he had instructed his men to collect some. He stated that his visit had 3 purposes: to greet Hiraku properly and thank him for doing business, to propose further trade opportunities, and to request the position of official government purveyor for the village. The girls explained this meant he would oversee all external trade. Michael presented a list of goods his company could supply, and they continued their discussions. That evening, before leaving, Michael asked about their alcohol, but Lastus Moon firmly told him it was off limits. Frightened, Michael dropped the subject. Unbeknownst to the village, 3 days earlier Michael had been approached by 2 girls bearing farm goods. Initially, he had considered turning them away, but his instincts told him otherwise. Meeting them, he recognized Florim of the Chrome family and realized he would have been in grave danger had he refused. Shocked further to learn the other was Lastus Moon, he grew uneasy. The girls presented apples and other fruits, explaining that they wished him to buy them in exchange for certain items. Michael realized the apples were the very ones creating a stir across the demonic kingdom, fetching high prices at market. With the other fruits as well, he recognized a massive profit opportunity that outweighed the risks. He agreed to their terms and prepared to supply the requested goods. Still, he grew increasingly nervous upon learning their destination was the Forest of Death and the village of Teju. Back in the village, Hiraku prepared seafood hot pot, which everyone enjoyed. Soon after, another dragon appeared, clearly hostile. Believing it to be connected to Dorim, Hiraku prepared for battle. The dragon mocked him, but Hiraku grew serious, hurling his spear. Though the dragon dodged the first strike, he immediately followed with another, bringing it down. Transforming into a young woman, the dragon surrendered. Dorim arrived and explained that this was Hakarin, his older sister. Hakarin admitted that she had come because Dorim, while drunk, had once declared Lastus Moon would be given as a bride to Hiraku. Curious about the man her brother spoke of, and hearing he was strong, she had decided to test him. However, she also confessed that much of her anger stemmed from the fact that her younger sister, 9 centuries her junior, would marry before her. Though Hiraku accepted her presence, he insisted she clean up the mess she caused. Later, over dinner, Hakurin proposed they play mahjong with wagers. Hiraku insisted he had nothing to bet, so they considered using punishments instead, joking about strip mahjong. Competitive and unwilling to lose, Hakurin, Dorim, and Lastus Moon all agreed. As the game progressed, Hiraku soon found himself down to his last piece of clothing. Believing he had a chance to win, he instead lost again and was forced to remove his pants. Elsewhere, Bizzle reported that Hakurin had been seen in the village, further alarming Glatz, who feared that Hiraku's settlement had gained enough power to challenge entire kingdoms. Meanwhile, the demon lord Gargard lamented that his daughter had been in a sour mood and had ignored him all morning. Glatz dismissed his concerns, urging preparation of military funds, only to discover Randon had gone missing once more. Back in the village, Hakurin chose to remain. Though she complained frequently, she proved skilled at nearly every task she attempted. In the end, she became the children's teacher, instructing them in reading, writing, and mathematics. One day, a group of Lamia girls led by Junior arrived, bringing gifts and begging Hiraku to spare their lives. Confused, Hiraku asked what they meant, and the Lamia explained that younger wolves and spiders from the village had entered a dungeon in the forest, forcing the Lamia to flee their homes. Hiraku decided to trade the gems that had been mined, offering some of his crops in exchange. He expressed his happiness at the possibility of continuing this trade, and the Lamia agreed. However, he also asked them to wear clothes when visiting the village, since they often came topless. The Lamia then established a delivery service, carrying traded goods for the village. Meanwhile, a group of girls convinced Princess Yuiri of the demonic kingdom that Hiraku's village was plotting something sinister and intended to use Forum as a hostage. Believing them, Yuiri resolved to defeat the village and rescue her friend. Bizzle soon visited Forum to warn her about Yuiri's military campaign. He revealed that Rosalind, Claquet, and Raj were the ones who had persuaded the princess. Forum, frustrated, thought the trio foolish, especially since she had already sent reports describing the village's strength. Bizzle explained that the reports sounded so exaggerated that they had been dismissed as unrealistic. He also cautioned that if Forum tried to stop the campaign, others might suspect her of treason. Nevertheless, he urged her to devise a way to prevent disaster. With the attack scheduled for the next day, Forum reasoned that the best solution was to demonstrate the village's strength without mobilizing its full force. She arranged for Junior and the Lamia girls to intercept the invading army. After receiving 10 boxes of apples as payment, the Lamia confronted 300 men and forced their immediate surrender. As a result, Rosalind, Claquet, and Raj were brought to the village. Forum explained that they would work for the community as though their lives depended on it, specifically under her supervision. Should they attempt anything harmful, Hiraku was authorized to dispose of them. When Hiraku inquired about the fourth girl who sat silently on a throne, Forum clarified that she was merely observing for the time being. As Hiraku left, Forum reminded the trio that if they worked honestly, their past transgressions would be forgotten. They were to hide their identities, while Princess Yuiri would be treated as an ordinary villager. Forum then gave them a tour of the settlement. Initially, the noble girls dismissed the idea of living in such a remote place and attempted to escape. However, they quickly encountered inferno wolves and giant spiders, which forced them to abandon the plan. Fearing punishment, the trio submitted and began working diligently under Forum, eventually becoming known as the Town Hall Girls. Over time, they grew accustomed to village life. Yuiri, seeing how peaceful the settlement was, regretted ever planning an attack. When she asked why the Demon Lord had not stopped her, she explained that she had been worried about Forum, whom she believed to be held hostage. Since the two were childhood friends, Forum reassured her and promised to share everything openly from then on. Yuiri agreed to live as a normal villager for the time being, and even began helping with the farm work, compelling the other girls to join her. When it came time for Yuiri and the girls to leave, Rosalind, Claquet, and Raj decided to stay, explaining that they had not yet repaid the village's kindness and still had much to learn. In reality, they had grown fond of the hot baths, the delicious food, and the lack of political pressure. After Yuiri returned home, the Demon Lord Gargard complained to Bizzle that his daughter seemed more dignified and constantly occupied. Bizzle observed that Yuiri was beginning to take an interest in politics and diplomacy, remarking that daughters often grew up before their parents realized it. Upon hearing the word adult, Gargard jumped to the conclusion that Yuiri must have met a man and expressed a violent desire to kill him. Bizzle warned that such behavior would only drive Yuiri away, which quickly calmed the Demon Lord. Back in the village, preparations for the pre-winter harvest began. To everyone's surprise, the yield was far larger than expected, leaving them without enough storage space. Lastisman suggested sending some of the surplus to her father, and Hiraku agreed. Hakurin proposed also sending supplies to her parents. When asked, she revealed that her father was the Emperor Dragon Du, and her mother the Hurricane Dragon Rayarin. Lastisman delivered crops to her father before heading to Shashado City to distribute more. There, Michael Goran asked her to defeat a monster that had been attacking trade vessels. She gladly accepted and swiftly eliminated the threat. Meanwhile, Hakurin traveled north, and on her return journey, she encountered a group of people seeking to relocate to the village. Their leader, Ya, explained that they were not dark elves, but mountain elves. Recently, they had been struggling to find food in their homeland. Hiraku hesitated, unsure how to accommodate them. Misinterpreting his concern, Ya apologized for troubling him and prepared to leave. However, Hiraku clarified that he was only considering where they might stay until houses could be built. Overjoyed, Ya promised that her people would hunt for their own food. Yet when they tried, the monsters proved too strong. Hiraku reassured her that it was not a problem. One day, Ya noticed him struggling with pottery. He admitted that he lacked the necessary clay. Confident in her understanding of the earth, Ya volunteered to find some and assured him she could easily escape any monsters. She returned successfully with clay, allowing them to craft pottery. Hiraku was delighted. Later, news reached the village of a newly discovered dungeon. At the girl's request, a survey team was dispatched. Meanwhile, Hiraku completed the men's bathhouse and took the first soak. Outside, Forum caught the trio of noble girls attempting to sneak in and confronted them. They sheepishly admitted that they had only wanted the excuse to massage Hiraku's back. Forum scolded them, reminding them of their low rank and that such behavior would not elevate their status. When the survey party returned, they reported the presence of a dangerous blood viper inside the dungeon and recommended an extermination mission. The mountain elves insisted that this was vital, explaining that blood viper meat was extremely valuable. It was said to overflow the body with vitality, strengthen bonds between husband and wife, and even bless couples with children. Understanding their desperation, Hiraku urged patience, insisting the matter be discussed by the entire village. As winter set in, Hiraku visited Ru, who had been feeling unwell. When she described her symptoms, Sina asked whether she had been craving sour food. Ru admitted that she had no appetite but could still eat tomatoes and fruit. Sina remarked that someone in the village had once said the same. When Hiraku asked what had happened to that person, Sina explained that the community had congratulated them on their pregnancy. It soon became clear that Ru too was expecting, and her pregnancy was progressing well. Ru's pregnancy prevented her from transforming, but life in the village continued steadily. Since the maids insisted on waking earlier than Hiraku to attend to chores, he began rising a little later so they could rest. With the village now much larger, breakfast had to be divided into 3 groups. Hiraku belonged to the first group. One morning during breakfast, Gran Maria informed him that 3 killer rabbits had tried to infiltrate the farm. Fortunately, Kuro and the wolves had dealt with them quickly. Hiraku considered it fortunate that the rabbits continued their attacks, as it meant a steady supply of food. He also observed that while the angels always maintained a composed and dignified appearance on duty, once free, they grew lazy and depended on others to cook and clean for them. After finishing his meal, Hiraku began working in the fields. He used the almighty tool to eliminate garden pests and later took a lunch break. Lunch was not common in that world, so villagers had needed time to adjust. The elves, who rarely ate breakfast, initially worried if morning meals would deplete supplies. The beastmen, unused to daily meals, had thought they were being treated kindly, only to be cast out later. Over time, however, everyone adapted. Though many villagers helped with large projects, such as tilling new fields, Hiraku usually handled planting and specialized tasks himself using the almighty tool. Hoping to brighten the settlement, he planted flowers to add color. Beyond farming, he often used the tool to create useful items for villagers, always grateful to God for such a blessing. Occasionally, he joined the maids in military training. While he did not think the village truly needed it, they insisted. He saw it more as fitness training for them, but he participated anyway, even though he was clumsy with weapons other than the almighty tool. At sunset, his work ended and he returned for dinner. That evening, the maids proudly served him a new dish, claiming they were confident about its taste. After sampling it, Hiraku judged it to be only 20% good. and advised them to serve meals only when they were at least 50% confident. They refused, however, insisting they could not waste food. Later, Forum gave him a letter from Princess Yuri, who requested more apples and also a dress. Fam explained that Yuri admired the clothing crafted by Zabutan and hoped for similar outfits. After dinner, Hiraku bathed alone, though he occasionally found himself in the women's bath by mistake. Even afterward, he often felt uneasy, as elves tended to stalk him. Sometimes, he even tricked them into revealing themselves before thanking God for his life and going to sleep. The dwarves, meanwhile, dedicated themselves to brewing alcohol. Though Hiraku had expected them to be drunkards, they took their craft seriously and never drank while working. They later requested that grape production be tripled, and Hiraku agreed. One day, Sina rushed to him, announcing a strange visitor. Hiraku discovered a man bowing before the wooden god statues he had carved. Surprised that the stranger had entered unnoticed, Hiraku was further astonished when Ru identified him as Varife, the progenitor vampire. Varife expressed joy at Ru's pregnancy, explaining that while vampires usually continued their bloodlines through blood pacts, natural pregnancies were rare and precious. He urged her to cherish the child. When Hiraku asked who the man truly was, Ru described him as her grandfather. Varife revealed that he was 4,000 years old and had preserved his life by erasing memories periodically, keeping only essentials such as his name and clan. He apologized for entering uninvited, explaining that he had originally meant only to pass through but was struck by the statue's remarkable likeness to the creator god. He confessed to having met God at birth, who had told him to do his best despite being born with an abnormal body. A reference, Hiraku realized, to vampirism. Varife asked for the statue, but Hiraku refused, saying it belonged to the village. Instead, he carved another one for him. Deeply moved, Varife wanted to pay, but Hiraku declined. Varife promised instead to find a way to repay him. After leaving, Varife brought the statue to a great temple. The head priest, who had not seen him in 50 years, welcomed him warmly. Varife asked to enshrine the statue at the temple, and the priest allowed it, even offering to move the existing one. The priest admired the craftsmanship and wanted to honor the sculptor, but Varife advised against naming Hiraku, saying he preferred a quiet life. He then instructed the priests to spread word across the temples, urging respect toward Hiraku's village. To express his gratitude, Varife later sent Hiraku a magnificent piano as a gift, celebrating Ru's pregnancy. Though reluctant to accept such an extravagant gift, Hiraku eventually placed the piano in the dining hall. The three hall girls recognized it as a ceremonial instrument reserved for great temples and longed to play it. Yet, afraid of damaging it, they asked Hiraku for a practice piano instead. He complied by asking Michael Goran to procure one. Soon, many girls began learning to play, though their nightly music sometimes disturbed Hiraku's sleep. Life in the village continued with routine meals, though Ru often reminded Hiraku to pause for lunch when he became absorbed in work. She insisted on moving about, saying light exercise was necessary during pregnancy. The girls were caring and protective toward her, though Ru admitted her main struggle was abstaining from alcohol. Out of solidarity, the three killer angels swore off drinking as well, though the temptation drove them nearly mad. They proposed selling off all alcohol to remove temptation, but Hiraku advised against it, pointing out that aged liquor would only grow more valuable. The dwarves initially worried when no one wanted to drink anymore, but after Hiraku explained the plan, they happily increased production instead. Soon the time of birth arrived. The entire village showered Ru with gifts. One evening, she went into labor, and by morning had delivered a healthy son, Alfred. A week later, Hiraku reflected on his journey, from living alone to now being a father. Unsure whether Alfred inherited vampiric traits, he marveled at the boy's human-like appearance. Grateful for the villagers' generosity, Hiraku introduced a new system of reward medals, silver coins that could be traded for desired goods. Tia noted that it resembled currency, and Hiraku confirmed this was intentional. With the growing population, he could no longer personally manage distribution. He explained that currency would prevent conflict caused by differing valuations of goods. Each person received 3 coins, while wolves and spiders were given larger shares to account for their numbers. Some villagers spent quickly, while others hoarded their medals. Orders for furniture and toys increased, keeping Hiraku busier than ever. The village later held a grand feast to celebrate Alfred's birth. Alcohol flowed freely again. Rue, though unable to drink while nursing, cheerfully watched others enjoy it. The dwarves unveiled a new wine, sealed in a great barrel. With Donovan's wooden hammer, they opened it, then suggested bottling some for the future. Hiraku agreed, proposing they save it until Alfred was grown so father and son could share it together. Meanwhile, in the Demon Kingdom, news of Alfred's birth reached Beazle. Realizing the village could not be defeated, the leaders discussed ways to maintain friendly relations. Some suggested intermarriage, but the Demon Lord misunderstood, thinking they meant Princess Yuri, and opposed it. Back in the village, Tia, Hakarin, and Forum informed Hiraku that more than 100 refugees sought safety from war. Hiraku recognized the village could not accommodate so many, and proposed creating a second settlement. Rue supported the idea, and the girls eagerly suggested naming it Great Tree Village as well. Though Hiraku acknowledged it would be much work, he agreed, and preparations for expansion began.